Good evening. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know if any of you have ever met Jennifer Hughes, our conservation administrator.
Hello, Jennifer. So we can do some quick introductions.
Yep.
I'm Bill Callahan,
I'm Karen Blake.
Thomas Ringlet.
Jen Goldman.
and then
Why didn't know you'd do that?
That's right, that's how it should be.
Right.
so welcome. Thank you for coming. And Joanna is here as well. From,
All right.
great.
We should do doing conservation first. I don't want to.
Right. So we want to, Eric? Do you want to do the community? Do you want to do community development or conservation first? Whatever you want to do.
Well, whatever you guys want to do. I was here about 2-3 months ago. I think it gave a pretty good overview of the division, all the various departments. I'm certainly happy to have Jennifer and Joanna here to give more details of conservation and Stevens Estate.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm really here to answer any questions. I think the budget's been pretty straightforward for each department throughout the
Right.
division. So, but if you want, we can turn it over right now to conservation.
Sure. Okay. Jennifer, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I think our budget's fairly consistent from year to year. You know, I think this year we added a bit in the stormwater permitting, expecting the new EPA MS4 permit to come out.
Excuse me for 1 minute, what page are we on?
132.
130. It starts at 132.
132.
Page 132.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
Outside of that, we budget for things we know will increase, like maybe permits, dues potentially to some of the organizations, the Mass Association of Conservation Commissioners that we belong to, some of the workshops that the commission and the staff attend. But outside of that, things stay fairly level.
Maybe Jennifer can give you an overview of what conservation really does, since
Right.
there are some new members
Right.
and stuff.
Right, so conservation's responsible for permitting under the Wetlands Protection Act and the local bylaw. We also manage all the town's open spaces. There isn't really a budget specifically for that, but it's part of what we do.
So.
There's no budget for the open spaces, I don't follow.
Yeah.
We actually don't budget actual money to do improvements to the open spaces. So in the past, we've had CPA grants to do things like kiosks at the open space parcels, but we don't specifically have a maintenance budget or anything like that.
Can you think what the likely sources of revenue might be in your department?
So we do collect permit fees, and that does fund a full-time field inspector in our department.
The revenue fees.
Right.
The fees are these fees for determining the perimeters of wetlands or?
They're fees for filings,
Filing
much like
fees?
building and planning, and every time you file with the Conservation Commission, you have a state fee, of which the town gets half, plus $12.50. I'm not really sure who figured that out. Plus, we get our local bylaw fees, and those all go into a permit account fee for administration of the Conservation Department as it was set up
And
originally.
where would we find that in the general funds?
It's labeled wetlands filing fees. I'm not sure exactly where under revenues it would be, Karen.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is, I only see under conservation fees on page 50.
Page 50.
Page 50. It says general and enterprise fund revenue by year.
So the conservation fees, that very small amount, is things we collect for things like copies, wetland markers. That's not the,
Where is the rest of it?
this
If I'm
isn't
not
the budget
mistaken-
as I
yeah,
look
if
at
I-
it, so
if
I'm not
it may be a
familiar.
revolving fund, maybe under the revolving fund article, because we expend out of it. So I don't have the town meeting
The
book in front of
legislation
me.
for setting up a Conservation Commission filing fee account is that it can only be used for administration of what the Conservation Commission does. It cannot be accepted into the general fund. That was the way the legislation was set up.
So it's
The
a lot like the other
legislation
revolving
doesn't-
fees for
Yeah.
for schools and youth department and community.
Only with
Services.
your fees, there isn't an allocation from those fees for open space upkeep.
No, but the conservation field inspector does do a lot of the management of the open space. So she just finished up submitting the town's open space and recreation plan to the state for approval. She does a lot of the work with the Friends of North Andover Trails, the volunteer organization that does a lot of work on our, basically maintains our trail system for the town on a pro bono basis.
And your field inspector is a full-time?
Is a full-time position, correct?
Full-time position. Half Mile Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Who hays it? How often? And what is the hay worth?
We have a lease agreement. That's a difficult situation. The quality of hay on Half Mile Hill is not really worth a lot because we don't, it's in our watershed protection district. We don't allow them to use chemicals, herbicides, pesticides. We don't allow them to full-on till the soil and possibly cause erosion and sedimentation into the lake. So the quality of the hay up there is not phenomenal, but
It's organic hay?
we do. But the money-
Naturally grown.
I think the money in hay is feeding to livestock, and you can't feed what's up there to livestock. So it winds up as erosion control, basically, on sites, hay mulch, that sort of thing. So we have a lease arrangement with the farmer. It's hayed, again, because of the ground nesting bird habitat up there, we have time restrictions on when that field can be hayed, and that also lessens the quality of the hay. So if we, even just putting a time restriction on the haying of the field has caused us some problems in
With
past
usage.
years that we can't get a farmer to hay it at that point in the year. So, and we don't want the field to revert to forest or woodland. It is habitat for ground nesting birds. So
And for people who are walking there,
right.
It's difficult to walk in that stubble, and so
Right.
I frequently hear, as I'm out and about, when is this field going to be hayed again?
So
And-
last year it was really late in the season, again,
way
because it's
late.
not a priority field for a lot of the farmers who come to hay it.
Do
So,
you think you might check that hay quality again?
well, we actually have someone on the Conservation Commission who's a hay farmer himself, and he agrees, he understands the limitations on getting it hayed. It doesn't
Okay.
have a lot of cash value.
All right, I mean, I just had some horse people opine, local horse people on hay. And
Equine?
its cost.
Or- no.
Yes, right.
Equine opine.
Equine opine, right. Okay, well, all right, that's fine. I'm just looking for every little bit.
Is there any like state money involved?
There are different grants and whatever. We don't put money in our operations budget. The open space is just that, open space. It doesn't need a lot of caretaking and maintenance, and not like our fields and whatever. So as the opportunity arises and we work with different organizations like the Trails Committee or a state grant or some sort of special funding, but not that is part of our operational budget.
And Friends of North Andover Trails have applied for some of those grants and gotten things to do boardwalks, or they just got one recently to do new signage within our kiosks that they'll be doing in the next year or so. So
And
we're very
sometimes
lucky
some
to have
minor
them.
projects are done by an Eagle Scout, someone
Yep.
on an Eagle Scout project.
So grants are then just used for a specific project, and we'll never see it in the town budget. It's kind of goes directly.
Well, you never know if you're going to
So
get
it's not
one.
going to go through your revenue and then
Right.
sits
Well,
there, so-
the cycle is different depending on whether it's a state grant, federal grant, a private foundation grant, or whatever. So when any town department applies for a grant and it's received, it's accepted by the Board of Selectmen, and then an offsetting account is established. An offsetting expense account is established in order to expend those funds for whatever is necessary. And then sometimes the grant comes up front, sometimes it comes after the fact, et cetera.
So is there what's the number we can around conservation? Are we talking $10,000s of dollars, thousands of dollars roughly in average?
Some years money and some
Grants?
years none.
Right. So last year we applied for a forest stewardship grant. It was a matching grant. We had to provide the same amount of money in matching funds as we received in funds. We did some forest management on Osgood Hill as a demonstration timber harvest. That money all came after, so we had to provide the funds up front, and then we were reimbursed later.
What was the grand total?
$11,000.
$11,000.
Yeah.
It was $11,000. Is this something that can be applied for annually, like for all of our open lands?
So this year I intend to apply for one to do forest management. Just the plan itself at Windrush Farm, they're accustomed to having had forest management out there. The plan is very old, and as we started at Osgood Hill, we can get grant money hopefully when the new grant cycle comes through to do just a plan out there to start and then go from there.
At Osgood Hill, did you say that the forest management was confined to a certain space? It was almost like an experimental?
Very small, right.
Very small. All right.
Because timber harvest can generate revenue,
Yeah.
and there is some interest in doing that up there, but that's a big operation and takes probably more oversight than the conservation department has, but there is some interest in doing that, and it is revenue generating, but again, you have to have people who can manage and oversee. And
So if you can thin that forest, you can thin some maybe other forests around
Correct.
town, and
Yep.
so when you get one of these grants, does it say it has to be small or experimental?
This
or
one
could you
did.
say,
This one did need to be because it couldn't be revenue generating. It had to be a matching grant, so we had to expend funds, we had to spend them, and we had to provide
And you're
volunteer
still
match.
working on finishing up the
Invasives
invasive
managed.
species so that
Yep.
you can collect the
Another 2,000 or so. I think.
2,000 or 3,000
Yep.
on that. Okay, I'm just,
The grants aren't hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And
No,
they're not
but-
renewing. We don't get the money next year. We have to reapply.
you have to reapply every
And
year.
recompete, exactly.
Okay, well, I'm
and it's
just,
very labor intensive on a staff end.
so what's involved?
Grant reporting.
Oh.
Everything everybody does, all kinds of receipts, signatures by the labor that performs the work, volunteer work. There's a lot of intensive.
The after reporting is actually more than just
More than-
doing the grant writing itself.
The after reporting.
The
Right.
So it's,
after reporting.
in order to get one of these grants or get them on a, sort of, let's say, a rotating basis, you would have to have a lot of backup
Right.
help in order to do that.
And there were a lot of people who helped with this particular. DPW was instrumental. They, got dumpsters lined up, and they assisted with coordinating some of the volunteer efforts, having staff on hand to provide dump trucks to take stuff away. It was really a concerted effort, and that's what made us realize that if we're going to do some full-on forest management, we really need coordination of multiple departments. This isn't going to be a conservation effort.
There must be professional forestry management
We had a forester who helped us with
outfits
this.
that could do it contractually?
Sure, and then you have to pay them
Yeah.
outside of the grant.
Of course.
How many people do you have in your volunteer committee? You do have a volunteer committee, right?
I do not. So Friends of North Andover Trails is actually through the Improvement Society.
Yeah, what's it called? Yeah, I think
North
It's
Andover
North
Improvement.
It's just a local nonprofit.
Yeah.
So.
No. I
Is
was
it
told
North
somebody was on
Andover
the
Improvement?
conservation committee, so.
There's there's the
Oh, the commission.
The commission
The
itself.
commission is
commission.
appointed.
Yeah.
It's a 7-member commission. They are volunteers, but
And
they're
that's called Conservation Commission?
correct.
Sorry,
Like the
wrong word.
planning board, the
Thank you.
ZBA.
Right.
It's
That's
very
what I
similar.
Thank you.
Right. So they do the
Yeah, I know what they do.
the hearings, and then I think the tough part is the community preservation, all the C's: community preservation, conservation, and the fact that a lot of it overlaps.
Right.
Um,
So open space purchases are more often the Community Preservation Committee,
Right.
not so much the Conservation Commission, although they're very much involved in putting conservation restrictions on the property afterwards, monitoring, all that sort of thing.
I noticed that you have a process whereby some of your requirements can be amended or modified.
Mhm.
How does that work?
So to amend the bylaw is a vote of town meeting, and I think that's been done in years past. To amend the regulations, it's a public hearing in front of the commission. We've been revising the stormwater regs now over the past 2 years, which are about to be final. I think the commission voted at the last meeting to finalize them on March 23rd, their next meeting. They'll be printed and in place. That was to align the stormwater requirements of the wetlands permitting under the bylaw with what's required under the land disturbance permit.
Yeah.
So try to make things uniform.
So I was just reading from this section that where it says how many certificates of compliance were issued and all of
Right.
those statistics. It says, and 2 extension requests, 2 amendments dash modifications for a total of 133 permits. So this amendment or modification doesn't seem like it's a bylaw one.
Oh, no, those are amendments or modifications of existing orders of conditions under the Wetlands
You have an
Protection Act.
existing order of condition, and someone has said, due to the impossibility
more
of
time,
this
I need
or
to make some
that,
changes.
we can't do this for
finish it.
we can't finish it, or we could finish it, but this thing doesn't fit into that thing like we all thought it would, and so maybe it has to fit like this, and so you can
A lot
make
of them
it.
are monitoring requirements, so they've restored something or planted something, and they monitor those plantings for a year or two.
And most likely, the original issuance was in a prior year.
Yeah,
And the Permit Extension Act messed all of that up, making the permits now 7 years long, and they're getting their first extension after 7 years, so it's
oh,
very
I see, all right. And
interesting.
so when you create a wetland for a drainage project, an area needs to be drained.
We don't, in North Andover, it's very rare that you would alter an actual wetland.
How about making one where there wasn't?
Also very rare. Most often, restorations and plantings are buffer zone, where maybe someone's lawn or a project went right up to the edge of the wetland, and now you're going to take back some of that to create a bit of a buffer to the wetland to try to filter pollutants and allow more infiltration of groundwater. But it's rare in North Andover that anybody would actually be altering a wetland.
Or creating one.
Or
creating a wetland by, let's say, putting in foundation drainage.
But you don't create a wetland
No.
by doing that.
I mean, over time, you could potentially create one, but not to get too
Not
technical,
usually
but
intentionally.
Not intentionally,
the Wetlands
yeah.
Protection Act was revised in 2008, I believe, to any kind of stormwater creation, anything you turned
Yeah.
from upland into stormwater is no longer considered a wetland, even if it turns into a wetland. Things that were created prior to 1996, I believe is the date, that were created as stormwater still have the potential to be wetland because sometimes they were actually created in actual wetland. The regs are complicated at best.
I can see that you have a great store of knowledge.
Been doing this for a while.
Yes, I've been doing this for a lot of time.
How's
right?
it actually defined? I live on Coventry Lane. And I was asked, is there wetlands? I said, oh, no way, there's no wetland. And then I saw a map, and it was not at my house, but really like 2
Right.
houses down the road. It's like, wow, I couldn't really even tell that there's wetlands. So how is it actually? Is it like a river stream going through, and then that's...
So there's your
wetland?
obvious wetlands, things that are actually carrying water where there's water confined, and then there's the definition of bordering vegetated wetland is a bit more complicated. It's a combination of hydrology, something that causes things to be wet seasonally in the year. It could be groundwater, it could be surface water, could be overland flow, but you also need plants and hydrology. So you need wetland, predominance of wetland plants, things that the state has designated as most often growing in wetlands, and then you need hydric soils. So when you auger into a soil in like a bright forested pine area, it'll come up and it'll be maybe orange or a dark brown. If you auger in a wetland soil, you're most likely going to see something that looks very gray or has some what we call mottling mixed colors in it. And those soils are one of the biggest things that determine what's a wetland. And they take many years to develop. So just because you install a foundation drain and water starts running into a particular area doesn't mean it's going to become a wetland. You need, continuous hydrology for something to become a wetland. So yes, so something that in the middle of summer is bone dry,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
can actually be a wetland.
If you could wave a wand.
I heard I was going to be asked this.
I said,
Probably going to be advised not to answer.
I said, be reasonable.
Reasonable.
It's a small one.
She's in the middle for a reason, Karen.
I see, one on one side, one on the other. Well, yeah, right. Answer at your own peril.
Understood.
What would you want?
You know, probably the open space piece is the hardest one, is having the commission be the care and custodians of such a vast amount of land, but not really having a budget to use to manage it is probably the biggest thing. And we do okay, I think, as a town, managing our open spaces, and there's a lot of players, Friends of North Andover Trails, get a lot of assistance from
Great.
DPW. We can apply
Trustees
for grants.
of
We do
reservations.
have land trusts, although
Mhm.
that's not necessarily, they have a mission and a purpose too and need funding. So, but yeah, there's a lot of players, and I think we do an okay job, but
Yes.
we could definitely do better.
Wonderful. Well, you do.
It's great. So I was wondering, in terms of your department and how it runs in paper flow and information systems, are you guys moving down the road towards more sort of online permitting and the things like that that are happening in other spots in town and should
Right.
help you be more
So-
efficient?
The problem with the Wetlands Protection Act is the state has what's called EDEP, so you can file online with the state, and we eliminated the need for paper copies. We take 2 full-size copies into the department, and then we encourage everyone to submit electronic copies. That's predominantly how things get filed with us. We do all our presentations at the meetings and everything electronically. We try we're scanning just like everybody else, trying to get everything into Laserfiche. But you know, there's still a lot of paper being generated. It's hard to get away from until everybody can do it. But we won't be probably part of because the filings are state forms.
Right.
We won't be an online filing. You still would have to either do EDEP or submit us a paper copy of what's required.
Is any of that Google stuff that we have
Well, now that-
applicable?
Well, again,
Yeah.
it's a state mandated function, a state mandated form.
But
so
you could make a copy of it and throw it into
No,
Google.
meaning you
something.
fill
Go
out the
online
state's
with the
form.
state.
Yes.
you fill it out
We
right
use their
online.
form.
Yeah.
Oh, you fill it
Yes.
out online.
Yes.
So you would actually have to make a PDF of it and then really do a
And
whole
all we're
bunch of
doing then
other
is
stuff to get
duplicating
it in.
what's already there.
Yeah.
But we file everything produced on our end to the extent the state allows us to online with them. We don't mail them copies of anything. We do it all online.
So let me ask you, just because you have such expertise with this, what are the growing trends? What's sort of the hot thing in your line, as
In
they say,
conservation?
that we should know, that the citizens should know about or be tuned into?
Well, I think a lot of things conservation are turning, like the rest of the town, to stormwater management. You know, we're a town that's very built out. We have a lot of infrastructure, and so when projects come before us, it's a lot of times a factor of what you're going to do to upgrade your stormwater management, how you're going to improve what you're doing with the water that runs over your impervious surfaces, how you can get rid of impervious surfaces, how you can infiltrate more water, disconnect hard piped systems into more low-impact development systems. So there's a lot of function around that. And then, you know, with the open space that's left and the money that's available to protect it, what's important to protect and how are you going to do that, I think are probably 2 of the biggest things.
How
Oh, I was going to say, I saw that you, just on the open space, I saw that you just finished the open space plan, which I think
Went to the state today.
Which is great, great news. I've seen a couple of them, and I think that's really important for the town to have front and
Right.
center, because it'll probably affect a lot of fiscal decisions over the next, 10 years when it
Yeah.
comes to CPA funds and other things like that.
We spent a lot of time on this plan because so much of it is now based on the assessor's maps and what we have and don't have, and those plans and everything being accurate. So much happens so frequently that you really can lose track. And so this time we hired a consultant, we had a grant through the CPA, and I think we have a really good plan out there right now. All the departments were involved. There were a lot of meetings.
So then, it's probably too early for us to ask for a copy of it?
No, I mean, it's been submitted to the state. The state can ask for changes, but I can certainly
Love
send
to
a
see
copy
it.
to Angela, and she can get that to you.
Yeah, good, thank you. Love to see it.
Great.
We may mark it draft though until the state
Yeah,
approves it.
absolutely.
It will be, technically.
If I want
But the
to.
draft has been on a website for a long period of time now. And I'll put the final copy of what we sent to the state up there even tomorrow, but I'll make sure you get a link to that.
Great. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Okay.
Page 210.
Yes, good. Thank you.
210, thank you for that.
We've sort of already met Joanna Olet. He's our Stevens Estate
Yes.
Director.
This is exactly what they're looking for. Excellent. You have pretty much the...
I remember now. I think we had kids on the same soccer
Yeah,
team.
soccer. I was thinking that just
Took me a while.
ago. It's the what team was it? The BMW.
The Bears.
I don't know. My boy goes to a different team every year. So.
So just real quick, introduce Joanna. Certainly happy to have her. She came on, I want to say, beginning of July, correct?
20th of July.
20th of July, sorry, towards the end.
Close enough.
So really just a little over a half a year. I think she's doing an excellent job. State's doing well. She can get into that, but just, again, happy to have her.
Great. Okay. Sure. I mean, why don't you just give a quick overview? We've read through, and we know the background. I mean, I've been on the committee the longest, so when I started, I guess 4 years ago, it was just starting to turn black from red to black,
Yeah.
and so we know, the last couple of years have been a great, a great story. So I think we all have that background, and we've taken a look, and we talked a little on the capital thing. So if you just want to give your perspective and what you think,
Yeah.
what your big goals are for next year, which seems like there's a lot. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite ambitious. So yeah, I believe the last 3 years, like you mentioned, have been good for the estate. I believe I'm continuing that. In fact, we've gone from 35 weddings. Weddings are basically our peak business, our prime business. 35 weddings in 2015, and we've already got 52 weddings booked this year. So we're basically expanding on what we've already got. In addition to exploring other markets, I'm also focused on developing the Stevens Estate as a focal point of the community. As I live in North Andover too, I know it's a great community to belong to, and I know that through working with different organisations in the town and providing a venue as the Stevens Estate for all of these local organisations, we work with the North Andover Women's Club, we've got work with the Historical Society, Merrimack Valley Chamber, a lot of other organisations that we're trying to develop business with. And we want to be basically the destination that any business and any local organisation in the town feels proud to bring outside people in. And in terms of what we're doing at the estate specifically, we're right this week we have just embarked on CPA-funded bathroom renovation of the bathrooms on the second floor, which is really, really good news. If you've ever been to the estate, you'll see some of the things that have needed to actually be done to return the estate to its magnificent condition, because I'd say 99% of the estate is magnificent. It's a true gem in the marketplace. We really do compete with a lot of the high-end venues in the North Shore and beyond, and Boston itself, and we're actually gaining a great reputation now as a destination for weddings. And as I said before, that is basically our prime business, and now we're looking to develop what money we can make and monetize the estate even further by developing what values it has and actually monetizing what we have got there, because everybody wants to be there now. In addition to the bathroom renovations, we've just developed a 5-year capital improvement plan, which is funded by retained earnings. I would say mostly, yeah. In the next 3 years, and which is a lot of work in structural maintenance and systems that are in place, such as boilers and air conditioning, and work that has needed to be done in the past, and we need to do to basically maintain it as a place for the business that we do have. Other things that we're looking to do this year is develop. We had a 3-day open house weekend in December, which was absolutely fantastic. We're expecting about 200 people. We got 500 people, and we're expecting to build it even more next year, and we want to have about 1,000 people attend it. It had a really good turnout with local families, moms, kids, etc., as well as other people in the community and local businesses too.
What was the, you have an advertising budget, I see,
Yes.
and you got 1,000 people there?
We got, we got in December at the open house, we got 500 people there in
500 people
December.
there. So that was a lot more than you expected?
Right.
And how did you generate? Was it through direct advertising? Was it?
No, I'm sorry. It was basic.
Social.
A lot of it was social media.
Social media.
Facebook.
Yep.
Working with North Andover GovCAM and local magazines, publications, sending press releases out,
Yep.
and actually just networking with lots of organisations and people and everybody that we spoke to that came through the doors. You know, I think one of my background in hospitality and venues is basically you can get 250 people to an event there. Why would we pay to have a print ad in a newspaper? So
Yeah.
when we can talk mouth to mouth to individuals that actually go there. So it's definitely a lot of word of mouth, a lot of social media, and a lot of the low cost, networking engagement that we do.
It worked because there are some folks in Andover who, in
Edgewood.
excuse me, in Edgewood who are
Right.
looking to hold some events there.
Wonderful.
In fact, so I think someone has already booked a party.
Yes, yeah, we've actually got a wedding with a lady whose mother actually is in Edgewood, and I'm actually doing a tour in April with a group of people from Edgewood that
Yeah,
are coming over for the
excellent,
day for a
excellent,
lunch too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
lots of little things like that, and
That's
because
very
I live
close.
locally, I know.
Yeah.
How to tap into these different audiences.
You have a background in the hospitality business.
Yes, yeah, I started in hotels. I've got about 20 years of hotel experience, plus catering and venue events. I started when I was a baby. I like to say that. But seriously, I started in hotels, food and beverage. I've worked as a sommelier for Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. I've worked for Marriott Corporation. I've worked for the Boston Public Library in the Catered Affair in Boston. I've worked for Longwood Events in the State Room. I've done marketing, sales. Basically, throughout my career, I've kind of crossed all of the areas. So historic building management is a new thing to me. But I cherish it, and I love history. I grew up in England, as you can probably tell. I used to intern for the National Trust properties in England, and historic buildings are actually my favourite thing. So actually coming to the F. Stevens estate was the finishing touch for my career.
So I can see that you're homing in on the beverage service.
Absolutely, yes. We're working to develop packages, and we know that because we own the license, we own the liquor license. That's the
You
basic.
own it?
The estate, the estate owns the liquor license.
The town meeting 4 or 5 years ago passed a home rule petition that we petitioned the legislature, and because the town isn't allowed to hold the liquor license, but we got a home rule petition for that.
And is it a recurring expense every year?
Yes.
$3,500.
$3,500 every year.
Yeah.
Because under the old way, we could only get one-day licenses, and you're restricted to the number of one-day licenses you could get.
I see.
A question for you.
Sure.
There's a line item here for indirect subtotal expenses, transfer of capital.
I'll take that. All
I'm
three.
new to it.
Transferring
Yeah.
out.
All three enterprise funds have an indirect cost to the town, basically for the service. Because they're enterprise funds, all of the expenses incurred by that unit must be accounted for.
Okay.
So we have payroll, we have accounting, we have personnel and all that. So these indirect expenses are a specific calculation that water and sewer also
Okay,
has.
because maybe one person's doing work for multiple different
That's
divisions.
well, because there are
There's labor
units
costs.
in the town that are doing work
Right.
for the enterprise fund, not directly
Yep.
associated with the enterprise funds. So all three of our enterprise accounts, water, sewer, and Stevens Estate, will have an indirect line item in their budgets.
And they have retained earnings.
And
your
they currently
retained
have
earnings
retained
are what,
earnings.
about $150,000?
It's
Right now, something like that.
Well,
I saw it
that's what I wanted
somewhere.
to ask, because I know this is per you then. 2015 revenues were 43, costs were 351. Is this and then,
I'm sorry.
I'm comparing page 51's numbers?
51?
Yeah. to
Page 51?
212. Am I
I'm
supposed
sorry.
to be? It's the general and enterprise fund revenue. You need to correct me if I'm wrong. The Stevens Estate Enterprise Fund event fees.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that the revenue of the estate?
That's the revenue of the estate.
Okay. So we have 483 for 2015 compared to a 351 expense, and then we have a 322 adopted. I know it's not
Budget,
actual.
Right.
Correct.
2016
Yep,
compared to the budget of 322.
correct.
So it's a wash.
Well,
What-
it's anticipated as a wash.
I'm sorry, anticipated as a wash.
Yes.
So what happened in 2015 to have that bump, and then in 16 we look like we're going to be lower in revenue? But yet I'm hearing more events, more activity, more weddings. Was there something that?
No,
Yeah,
that,
and
that's
this is for
absolutely,
you.
it's exactly what Joanne has been saying. Through the success of the estate, the revenue in FY15 was much higher than anticipated.
Oh, I thought you meant for this coming.
No,
Okay, got it.
well, she already anticipates in FY16 too, but when you do the budget,
Right.
don't forget this
You can't
budget
do
was
it.
done in November of
14.
2014.
Yeah.
Got it.
So
Okay.
you don't exactly know what's going to happen
delay.
12,
Yep.
8 to 20 months down the line.
Got it.
So you can only project.
Right.
And there's a lot of expenses that are related directly to the levels of business.
Absolutely,
So it's,
without
it's
question.
difficult.
Okay, thank you. So I just-
So when you look out now, I mean, there's another big jump in the revenue expected in 2016 compared to 2015. So with all the activities, initiatives, where do you think can you go to 500,000, more than 500,000, 1 million in revenue eventually? I mean,
In an enterprise fund, you can't jump that dramatic from one year to the next. I don't know why I want to say, is it 10%,
10% in the
15? You
budget,
can only
yeah.
increase by 10% a year.
Well, I'm sorry, you're talking revenue or expenses?
no, revenue.
Revenue.
Well, but
Oh, that-
revenues is related to expenses. So,
Well-
but again, you only have so many dates to fill. And
That's where I'm gonna
right.
want to go. I mean, are we maxed out at 500,000, or could we go over? Just
in
just
its
where we're
heyday,
going.
in its heyday, in the early 2002, 2003, it was in the low 800s.
Well, there's,
With catering.
I was, no.
No, it was
Oh,
all,
really?
it was
Okay.
with an in-house
Right, we had
with
our
in-house
own
staff, and so again,
Fully staffed.
it was fully staffed, in-house cooking facilities. At that time, extensive use of the bedrooms on the second and third floor, as well as the carriage house was fully operational then. So the high, I want to say, was roughly about 810 at one point. I mean, can we build up to something 500,000? Sure, but again, Joanna is restricted by, in a way, the dates and the space. Through the winter months, we don't have a facility that can accommodate 300 people like we do in the warmer months when we have the outside tent. The inside function room, you could squeeze 100 in, and that's squeezing. You know, you can use the different parlors and whatever, but you're you can't have a 200-person wedding in January at the estate like you can at some of the private facilities. But once May 15th,
May the 1st.
May the 1st,
Yeah.
and the tent goes up from May the 1st till sometime in October, if the conditions hold up, we have the outside.
See, that's something that I wonder about, because we tend to think about the Stevens Estate as just this building and the carriage house, when really it's about all the land around that. So I think to Thomas's point maybe is, are there other things that we could be doing with that aren't necessarily building centric?
Oh, absolutely, I'm sure. Yeah, I think, in fact, Eric, we've been talking about putting a business use plan together for the carriage house for the future. Obviously, more work needs to be done, and
A lot of work.
a lot of
Yeah,
a
lot
lot
of
of
work.
work needs to be done. And plus, the grounds, there's 153 acres up there that
Yeah.
we can certainly explore. And I've been talking to people about possibly creating events that have a lot of outside, maybe more athletic or trails use. There's a lot more demand for that now, so I am actually talking to people about setting that up. And I'm also talking to scout leaders. We are also looking at having Eagle Scouts come and do projects with us, which combine outdoor space
Good.
use too. So
I mean, we'll point out, while it's 150 acres, and why the town bought it was to preserve the open space. So we have the trails, obviously, that,
Lead down to the
you
lake.
know, I'd say a good 100 of the acres, plus, you know, we have a concerted effort in town of controlling the land along the lake. So while it certainly can be used for trails and all that, not in this great commercial endeavor, but certainly the land surrounding the manor or the home and the stable and the carriage house. I think Joanna's right. We can better utilize that. I think in terms of revenue, we're basically at last year $500,000. We were at $484,000, I believe. And I believe again you'll see we've increased the number of weddings, but the real trick I think is getting more usage during the week. That's a huge
business
challenge,
use.
right? Business use. We're slowly getting that. Joanna's picking up on that, and that's a process. But that'll be another area, to build on top of the wedding and the I guess the more social gatherings on the weekend.
Right. You probably have better margins on
On the weddings.
Oh, you have better. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Well,
Everything.
Yeah,
that's
we
Yes.
mark up weddings on a
Fun, it's
and
local.
we've put
Yeah.
a good price increase in place for
Right.
Saturday nights. I've done a competitive analysis of what we're looking at against our competitors.
And we also don't have the expense of cooking or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So the caterers that are brought in
control cost.
privately pay a fee to the estate to come to the estate to do their business.
So it's important to recognize what revenue we do get is really just on the rental and on the bar.
Right.
And there is some fee on the catering bill, but so it's pretty significant.
Get back into.
No, it would take a major,
the.
Yeah.
the
Renovation
kitchen would
of the kitchen.
require a major, and I can't stress enough major
Right.
renovations in order to make it fully operational. First of all, you can't use the electric stove, and you need a full gas stove and whatever, which the estate has gas, but the ventilation system would need to be completely replaced, and we have no idea what the extent of that might be because it's a 170-year-old building. So it just wouldn't be able to warrant. We'd have no idea what it would cost, whether it's $100,000 or $2 million to fix the complete ventilation system to make the kitchen fully operational.
Yet that kitchen was fully operational around 2003.
Yes, that's correct.
It's almost
So
15
what
years.
happened in
That's-
the interim?
Exactly
Yeah.
that. The ventilation
changed.
system failed.
And there's
Right.
rules and regs that are tighter than
Yeah.
that.
Right, the
Right.
ventilation system failed, and again, now you're talking about staffing. I mean, we had at one time,
Full-time chef.
we had more than just one
Housekeeping,
full-time
yeah.
chef. We probably had 6 or 7 additional full-time people just for the kitchen function.
That's a
Right.
big.
Okay,
commitment.
so you're talking, so right now, we collect, a fee from the catering company to come in and use our warmers and whatever, and they bring staff and whatever. We don't have to incur personnel costs, benefit costs, health insurance, pensions, et cetera, workers' comp. So
Yes.
it's a
That's
balancing act.
pretty, yeah.
Yeah.
But just the fact that the ventilation system would need a complete replacement
Right.
is the major factor.
Yeah, and it's a much more sustainable model. So if we do go through a downturn,
Right.
you're
Right.
not faced
In
with
the,
a
in
lot
the
of
same
sunk
way,
costs.
Joanna mentioned the carriage house. We had a study done of the carriage house. We're talking to bring the carriage house up to code and standards. We're talking somewhere between $1.5 million to $2 million.
Right.
It's a significant investment that would need to be made in order to restore the carriage house.
So our focus has been, and I think you hit upon it, the last 4 years have been, slowly building that revenue up. To focus on the bathrooms, the community preservation funds have been critical for us to sustain us, and that's a match situation. But the focus has been and that's another thing, if we can get those bathrooms up to a higher standard, that will help with overnight. So we get some revenue from that as well. I mean, that's really declined because it's just not necessarily.
So you're thinking about overnights again?
Yeah, we
There's
might
no
get a
reason
couple
not
here,
to.
right?
Yeah, we were actually probably about 7 or 8% of our weddings this year have actually booked overnight rooms.
Which
There's
is-
a 4-room minimum because a person has to stay overnight, but
Nice.
we're making it work. But likewise, we couldn't sell overnight rooms when we've got weddings booked,
Right.
for other guests. So now we'll be looking at basically selling midweek business for the. just
And over
for
the last
overnight
3-4
rooms.
years, there have been several major capital improvement projects to the estate. All the brickwork was redone around the building, all of the windows were replaced, and the roof was replaced. So we made the envelope tight, which also resulted in a savings in heating and utility costs.
So let me ask you a question, maybe a little left field here, but the other thing about it is kind of where we are. Part of the appeal is that it's not so accessible, but it's also not so, our town isn't so accessible to a lot of people. So transportation has to weigh for a lot of folks. Any thought, and again, this is kind of top of the head, any thought about trying to come up with a way to facilitate transportation? In other words, part of having an event here is that we can get you here cost effectively, timely, in a facilitative way. And what I'm thinking about is something that would actually could be a kind of a revenue generator as a coordinator, almost like an Uber sort of
Right.
concept.
Yeah.
And because to me, that's what I hear all the time about functions. So, all right, we've got to get 60 people or 100 people there. And so I'm just...
I mean, it's interesting that there are some transportation systems, and in fact, a lot of the wedding groups are using school buses, like Salter school buses these days, and it's very popular. But yeah, it's another dimension that we can always think of. I think for groups, it's going beyond what we're good at and like the core of what we're doing, I would say, in a way, because you're looking to, when you're dependent on a transportation service to bring 200 people, then we'll get the blame if something goes wrong, and the estate will be affected. So it's kind of getting the balance right. We're trying to do what we do really, 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 really well, so people will talk about it, and developing all of those extra pieces will definitely be some things that we're looking into. Sure.
And it's one of the reasons why we're redoing the bathrooms too, in order to go back to having the overnight stays and whatever. I mean, many times we had 30, 40 people staying at the estate overnight, plus probably another 30, 40 at the carriage house. So right now, you don't have that ability. You may, especially if you have people coming from out of state, they have to stay at a hotel in Andover and whatever.
Right.
And as Joanna said, then they will rent the bus or some mode of transportation to get people from the hotel to the estate and back. But if we develop the ability for that overnight stay, we don't have to worry about just the 3 or 4 rooms, because we have probably 15 plus rooms.
we could sell up more.
We have about 15 plus rooms between the 2nd and 3rd floors for people to stay overnight.
So that carriage house can do.
That's
The
not
carriage,
even
The
that
main
carriage,
house.
the main house has 15 rooms or so. The carriage house could easily accommodate 40 to 50 people overnight at one point in time.
But not today.
But not,
No,
anymore.
yeah,
Not
not
anymore.
You don't want to go in
Estate
it.
Not anymore, not even
It's
close.
campers only.
I mean, what we call, which just so, to be clear, what we call a carriage house is really the stable. Where the
Yeah.
stables.
Yeah, where the
so-
stables used to be many
Not
years
the
ago.
little house at the
Yeah,
beginning.
No, that's the
No,
gatehouse.
That's the
yeah.
gatehouse.
That's the gatehouse.
That's
Which
another-
also
and
has
that's
its own
another thing.
potential.
Right.
Yeah.
We'd like to
Right.
get a little more visibility with that, but
Yeah.
that's another
Right.
thing.
I know I've often wondered about the gatehouse, if it could be like a. I know that some historic properties have a house and they do like a some sort of a thing where they'll let someone stay in the house because it helps to keep it run, and then they
That's where the groundskeeper used to be many years ago.
yeah. So it's yeah, that could be. that
Yeah,
could
we
be
had looked
kind
a few years ago into turning it into a commercial, small business office for a professional firm, lawyer, engineer, whatever.
Landscaper.
It's not zoned properly.
Really, yeah.
I saw that there was a building permit tacked up there about 4 years ago.
It's still in there, I think.
Well, because we did some work internally because again, you need to invest some money to not let it deteriorate to the point where
Right.
it's no longer viable and you have to tear it down. That's what happened to the plant house, which used to be in the parking lot. The building that we referred to as the plant house. It deteriorated, it got hit by a plow during a snowstorm, and then it was just let go, and at a certain point in time, there's no way you can invest any money in it because you're never going to recoup it, so.
It became a parking lot.
Right, so, well, it became an extension of the parking lot,
corner
but,
of it, yeah.
but that's why we did some work at the gatehouse in order to at least keep it feasible in the future if we want to do something.
I think,
Can we go back to the zoning question?
Yep.
I just heard it was not zoned properly for a business to be in there.
For that
The
gatehouse,
gatehouse.
correct, for the gatehouse.
right now.
What's the zoning?
It's actually in residential 1, believe it or not.
And what does it take to change the zoning?
We would have to, you make a recommendation, I would assume planning would weigh in on it, then like any other warrant, if it's a warrant article.
But again,
or a
it's
town
not
meeting.
just for the, it wouldn't just be for the gatehouse,
Right.
it would, because if not, that's illegal spot zoning.
Yeah, we
That's
don't-
my big question to you. Thank you.
I didn't know if that's where you were going, Jennifer.
I think the good news is we, with that 5-year plan, really focused on prioritizing what we can attack. It's challenging, obviously, while we are generating revenue, not significant enough revenue. And where we've, in the past, I think, though Ray's correct, there's been some major expenditures, and that was, again, critical, and a lot of it, again, with the community preservation funds. From our own budget, was more like a Band-Aid approach, right? And now we're, some of the asset, the boiler or the air conditioning unit, well past its life cycle. So we're anticipating those things, and we think we're in a good spot for that.
What are the other facilities in this area, Andover in this area, like the
Like
Stevens
the
Estate,
Stevens
for a
Estate.
wedding venue?
Like the
I'm
Stevens
just
Estate.
thinking of the
There's one
ability
in
to have
Haverhill,
30 or
isn't
40
Yeah,
guests.
well, Winnicott Castle
For a-
is
for a
there's
wedding.
the
A wedding?
Renaissance golf
And,
course. There's a lot of
you know,
Oh, yeah.
it's one of those cost-benefit things with, you know, how much money do you put in and how can you possibly recoup
I can
that
te-
in
I
the
can- I
season?
can tell you that the Stevens Estate, being owned and operated by a municipality, is very, very unique.
Yes, it is.
So there aren't any really legit comparisons that can be made, because everything else is privately owned and operated, which means they don't have to go by municipal statutes
Well-
on expenses and what to do and not to do, et cetera. So the Stevens Estate is, as Joanna said initially, it's truly unique. And we have some restrictions on how it can be operated. But everything else that we could compare ourselves to, you know, we're talking about a private company,
They're
private.
not disclosing their
private-
finances, much less.
I'm sorry?
They're probably not disclosing any financials either, so you have nothing to compare to.
Right, yeah. I would say when we talk to people that are coming to tour the Stevens Estate to book for a wedding, the
Do you
people,
ask them?
yeah, absolutely, that we're competing with Willowdale, and we pull people from Willowdale, Glen Magna Farms, even Mistlewood. I mean, that was a
smaller
tight
farms.
one. Absolutely, we've pulled business from smaller farms.
But I'm saying that's
No,
another
but
one of our
no.
competitors.
Out-
Right.
but that-
Collecting the
it's a
data,
different-
like,
it's a
are they
different
giving you the
marketplace.
pricing and the expenses that they're being quoted for their wedding at those locations? And if they are you collecting that data to start to build up a?
Yeah, I had to increase the prices for 2017 last year within a week of starting, just because I knew we were going to be, you know, selling ourselves short
Yes.
within a week.
Nice.
So I immediately had to do a competitive success analysis, and although I ask people where they also tour, I don't take their word for granted, but I do my own research.
Oh, that
But
was
basically, I think, I'm sorry, Willowdale charges like 7,900 at the moment for the venue. I've just increased ours for the end of 2016, 2017 to 5,700, but it was at 4,900 for the longest time.
I like
so.
this is like a free commercial for the
It's really that's.
So, but I was, that's where I was going. How fair are our rates compared to private functions?
They're assessed every year.
Could they say, you know, they run this at dumping prices, you know, because they are not a privately run company, you know, they don't
Absolutely
need to
not,
be
no.
cash positive, and if they lose money, okay, well, they get a slap on their hand in the town meeting, but overall,
I've never worked
So
for a
we're fair?
municipality before, so I've never
we're
had that.
fair
Yeah.
with our rates and not undercutting by, you know, 2 or 3 times, just because we
No.
can.
No, I
Well,
see
you don't,
the
you
value
don't want to be
in
that
the, in
dramatic.
dates.
You
No.
don't want to be that dramatic,
We-
because then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
No, I'm not saying I want to. I'm actually not even supporting that.
Yeah.
I want to have you want to compete at market prices, a fair competition, not at dumping prices, because you're not a privately run company. You know what I mean?
But again, as I mentioned before, we have restrictions because of the space. If you want to hold an event of anything more than 100 people in this time period, we can't accommodate you at the Stevens Estate because we don't have that kind of space. In the summer, as I said, we do have the tent. We can accommodate 250, sometimes even up to 300
350, yeah.
in the tent. But once you get into the cold season, you want to have a big retirement party or whatever, where you're expecting 150, 200 people. We're not in that market.
How is, here I go back to the carriage house again, how is that set up internally? Is there a room?
The carriage house wasn't used for functions. It was made. The carriage house on the first floor has 2 large rooms, sort of a split level for some reason. Don't ask me why, but it was almost like a split level. And then upstairs were a series of large dorm rooms.
Open dorm room.
Or open dorm rooms that sometimes had as many in each sort of space room, anywhere between 2 and 6, 7, 8 beds. So it was
Open
almost
rooms?
truly like camp. Well, and the last function we actually had there was probably 9, 10 years ago. I don't know exactly what it's called. The New England Youth Opera Company or whatever had its summer camp there.
Okay, like a youth
That's
hostel.
right.
know, so-
That's much more what it
you know.
would be like. Right. There's nothing in there, right? I'll be honest with you, salvageable right now
Yeah.
that you would want. It just
It's
isn't.
a major, major investment.
And we've invested some monies to just make sure, as Ray has said, along with the gatehouse, to make sure it's weather tight, so it won't deteriorate. We're protecting the asset. But we're not going to invest in that asset until we have a strong business plan, and that makes sense, and we can present that to the town.
And then we would need that $2 million up front to do it.
The business plan would support that or not?
No, it's a
Isn't
cost
that a
benefit analysis. You
historical-
have to build up the
Yep.
case and the brand.
Yep.
That's
See,
right.
Tom, to answer your
Yeah.
question, while she is running it as much as a business as she can, the constraints on budgeting and just the way money flows, as Ray has talked about municipal, publicly owned asset, is the challenging aspect.
And I
But
was
we're
gonna
not
say-
undercutting, and that's not,
No.
we're trying to be as competitive and, again, generating revenue.
And I'll give you
As best we can.
a clean example. $300,000 is listed as being part of the capital improvement plan for the estate. It's a prevailing wage because we're a municipality. So that $300,000, if I was in the private sector, could do close to $400,000 to $450,000 worth of work that I can't do in the municipal sector because it's a prevailing wage from $1. So those are the kind of restrictions we have to deal with too.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Joanna.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank
you
you,
very
everybody.
much. Thank you, Joanna.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Jen escaped.
I told
Everyone's
Jen she could
escaped.
leave a long time ago.
Okay.
Any other general? I
Any
believe
other-
you got all the material you asked for last week, right?
Yes.
Lynn sent you. I forget who asked for, or I think Tim asked for last year's. Transfers, which you
Right.
received. And there were 2 other things. One was who to bring tonight.
Right, and the other was the
The
Special
Jim
ed.
Maley report on sped.
Jim Miller report.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah. So we have that.
So those you all received. Any requests for this week?
Great.
Oh, just the plan for,
The draft plan.
Yeah, the draft
well,
plan.
it'll be. She'll put it on our website, and we'll send you the link.
So-
Are you
Joe, do we have
convening?
any
Because I have
questions
for
from
Eric.
community? That's the one thing I think, Eric, we did have you in for capital, but I want to just take a quick second if we have any questions on community development as a whole, which is on 140 or 139.
130, yeah.
Yeah, it's in budget places. Just forward-looking,
Sure.
obviously there's this big discussion about the master, you call it the master plan, I'll call it the master economic development plan.
Sure.
In my head, what are, I see 3 goals here, but can you go and elaborate a little bit more about forward-looking? What do you have plans to
I
be
don't know where
doing?
that is.
Hang on a second.
Page 137.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, certainly our big focus is on revisiting and revising and updating our master plan. this is common, I think most towns probably, or most communities, their plans, get aged out a little bit, so it's natural, obviously, that you want to keep doing a review of that. As I think I mentioned a couple months ago, in concert with that would be the recodification of the bylaw itself
And that
to
means-
support, well, the zoning bylaw, the bylaws, to be frank, over the years has become a little hodgepodged, and we have a lot of zones, and if you look at it, it can be a confusing document.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
It's extremely confusing.
Okay, so, glad we share that. So, really looking, I'll give you an example, one of the process we're doing right now on Route 125 corridor. I'm defining that part of the corridor really from Sutton Street to Haverhill. I don't know how many zones there are in that stretch, but there are multiple. And we have a nice report that was done about 3 years ago, study for that corridor.
Yeah.
We're trying to implement and pursue that, and so we will, where there's a more
So does that,
Homo-
like that question earlier, does that mean then for town meeting we'll see warrants? I'm trying to use your jargon.
if
or
not
changes
this
in
town
zoning?
meeting.
Not this town.
There is, you'll see a minor, a couple on, and that's always happening,
Right.
on certain parts of the bylaw, but in terms of we're talking a large
So
scale
next.
overhaul, and to do that, it's a large lift, and it should be done in concert with your master plan, so everything is, working together. So that's our
So you're
real
not voting
focus.
us, we're
No, but it's
more
the
like
goal
2 to
that
3, not next year, but more
I
a
need to
few
be
years.
managed.
Yeah.
How many years are we talking?
No,
Because I would like to say
I
next
think you'll
year
have
we'll
some
it.
next year. I honestly do. We can more quickly do some recodification because some things are just like
obvious, you're
obvious,
saying.
right?
Okay.
I think we can have a decent proposal or part of the proposal. It won't be completed next year.
Okay.
I think I've been in discussion, it's an 18-month to 2-year process. It can be, depending on how much, obviously, resources you put into it. We're not looking to rush it to the extent that, we want it done right.
Are
And
you
we'll
saying
bring in
that
the
this has
resources
to be
to do that.
done, this revision has to be done to the zoning code before we undertake the plan for the 128?
No,
Opposite.
there are, they should go hand in hand.
Okay. so
There are some things we could tweak,
But excuse me,
obvious
Karen, you're
things.
confusing the 125 plan with the
Oh, I'm
community master plan.
Right.
The codification is going to be as a result of the master plan.
Okay, well, I didn't know whether there was a tie-in and, for advancing the 125 corridor plan.
The 120, obviously, I think, again,
That's not part of
it's part
the
of, it will, clearly it's
will
part
be.
of our overall master plan.
But can 125 advance on
Yes.
its own?
Yes, we can advance on that. As a matter of fact, in part of the initial meetings of the OSGOD Review Committee, we've had a couple meetings. I think it's been obvious to us, we all know the significance of this overlay. And there's part of that report suggests that the overlay be extended, the benefits of the overlay be extended further into the corridor, so we're looking at that as well. So I think the bottom line to your answer to your question is yes, we can advance the 125 corridor quicker.
Are we working to advance part of that plan? Are we partnering in some way with the airport?
The airport, like I said at the last meeting, that was part of the discussion, was to step that up as well as other property owners and invite them to the table as well. But I have had some conversations with the director, Mike Miller, at the airport, and we're both on board about seeing how we can leverage off each other and build off each other and, make that asset an even more of a town.
Didn't we do some
Asset.
repairs to a runway over there?
They're doing the...
They're doing, not we.
Yeah, they do it. But
They're doing
they do
the
it.
Yeah,
repairs.
we do not own the airport.
Yeah.
Right.
The airport is owned by the city
I
of
read that wrong. I
Right.
thought we were
No,
doing
the
that.
airport
I was
is owned
gonna
by the
ask
city of Lawrence.
Yeah, right, whether we were going to get reimbursed for that. Was
No.
there, okay.
So you're right. I believe it's more it's it's off the runways and it's more for emergency and all that stuff. But it's something they
It's
need to do.
Federal requirement
Right.
about. I'm not using the proper term, but in case airplanes skid.
Oh, I know too, that Solo Cup building,
That site is for sale,
and was some work done on that building,
not by us. There has been some work done, I believe, by the property owner.
the property owner?
Yes.
Okay, because it was written in the passive, some work was done to the building, and I was
These
wondering.
125 corridor changes, will we see anything on the warrants for the town meeting for that, or will that happen after the
I'm
town
sorry,
meeting?
this town meeting?
Yes.
No.
So even though we can act upon it, acting then means to go and discuss it more, and then put in warrants
Yep.
for next year, is that
Yes.
correct? So we are a year away from starting to change the zoning and then implement.
Right, other than going for a special meeting, town meeting, but, yep.
So talk to me a little bit about who you would see engaged in these discussions, right? If you want this plan to really cover, ideally, both the physical and the economic opportunities, so the facility economic.
We talking the master
The
plan?
master
or
plan.
Master plan, the
That's
master
right.
plan,
Yep.
right? And at the same time, all of us driving around this town see
Right.
all this commercial space that's available. I mean, the signs are just everywhere, right? There's almost 500,000 square feet of vacant commercial space in our town. And then there are also these great potential development opportunities. Who do we need at the table in order to have the kind of discussion we need in order to really make this
For the master plan.
for the master
process.
plan? I'm talking for the master plan.
Well,
now.
and when they're done, there's a lot of public outreach, there's a lot of public, whether you call them charrettes and meetings, and that's part of the process. Again, bringing in the professional resources to those who do the market feasibility, and they look at your everything to say this is what you can do, what you should do, the overall, to getting a sense of the direction we want to go in. Again, that's why it's not just a simple process. A couple people sitting in a room on a table and drawing up a master plan and saying, here it is. It's a lot of community engagement. It's a lot of engagement of the property owners as well. And so, we're eager to get that started, and we will hit the ground running, July 1st. I think you've seen a significant request in there to start that.
But the funds are for outside people, that has nothing to do with the community force, correct?
Well, true, but the outside people, a lot of that will handle and do the public outreach
They will?
for us, yeah.
Okay. And that's how other towns around us have done the
Sure.
same?
Yeah,
So
it's
they
a-
started with the paid professionals, and they've pulled the town people together to
Yeah.
talk about what kind of towns you want to be.
It's part of
what's your
what they're
personality.
charged to,
It's $110,000.
Yeah, that's just the start of it, yes.
Right.
And you're saying, again, that could take several years?
certainly into the fiscal year 18, we'll be into that as well.
So what will we need we're talking 110 for the next year, what do you think we'll need it for the 2 years after? What's your guesstimate be?
Just so you know, in the 110 is, there are other things. It's not just from last year, and it's some of our assessments and the planning commission and other things. But, I've heard it's a $150,000 until we go out there and really, these are guesstimates.
I know.
And I think we're working in for next year, 80, 90. So thinking the next year after that.
So the biggest
Another 60,
expense will be in the
70.
first year?
That,
Here,
yes. Yeah,
the
of
front
course.
load. Okay.
So when you're all said and done with this, let me back up. So as this progresses, because it takes some time, how do we know how it's moving down the road? In other words, is this going to be a ta-da at the
No,
end, or how do we?
No, that's a real, I'm sure. Well, I think
We'll have to
utilizing
do that
your.
on purpose. We'll all remember that one.
I would use this form. I would certainly use reporting status reports to again, finance committee. I would assume the planning. See, the planning really runs it. And they're charged to run it, so it really, so that'll be a constant part of their.
So it's their domain.
Yes.
All right, so
Meaning
planning
planning
is the
board.
central.
Yeah, planning board.
is the
That's what I
central
meant by
part.
that.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So that's to me, that's I think also part of this, because as big as this is, the more people understand how it's progressing, I think you draw more. I think the potential is to draw more folks in. So I would encourage us as a community to figure out how we can have maybe way stations along there, or something that really lets people know, okay, it's like building a building. You want to see those pieces as it comes along.
Right.
So I really encourage us to think about ways that we can have formalized points. I think that might help you. It may draw more people in, because sometimes folks just aren't tuned into it at the right point.
I can appreciate that, and I would add formalized and focused,
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
so they're productive.
And
Just
are you
a-
guys familiar with any local towns who've gone through this? Like anybody near us who's gone through it locally
Recently?
in the past recently, and we could take a look and maybe on our own take a look and see what the end product looks like.
We can find out.
We can
So
find out.
not only have gone through it, but actually have finalized a plan.
Right.
Excellent.
Right.
Right.
Andover's format is pretty nice.
Yeah.
It's easy to follow, fairly. It's a lot of pages.
Yep.
What's your opinion on that format if we were to look at that?
Andovers?
Yep,
Or you mean
their master plan.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't really studied Andovers. I like them simple, as much as, I think
It's extensive.
sometimes you read, it might be extensive, but you might be reading 50 pages of the history of Andover. And that's nice to know the history of Andover, but I don't, be honest with you, I don't know how
So the
that
other towns
matters
you've
to the
seen are
master
shorter.
plan of going forward.
Yeah, they're small. So
I
you've
don't
seen
know,
other
mean to
towns'
suggest.
master plans, and are they shorter and more condensed and very?
I think that's sitting with, again, the professionals, and if they showed me value or showed the town value in some of that depth, okay, they could sway me a little bit. I think it's how we direct them.
They vary remarkably. So
That's what I'm saying. Have you
Yeah.
looked at any in other towns?
Yeah, I've looked at a
besides
few.
Andover?
I've
Anything that
been
you
studying
find-
ours, and it's it's you mentioned the airport, and I think from your sense, you believe the airport is a valuable asset to the community.
Only in that there was a section on it in the UMass plan
Right,
survey.
and I think they
And
reference.
how that was going to be connected in, maybe with the transportation hub.
Right.
Heaven knows how that would be done, what with maybe cooperation from Haverhill or,
Right, and our current master plan,
yeah.
actually focuses on the kind of abolishment of the airport. So, we're not.
But that was also
Yeah, it was-
done 2 decades ago.
I was going to
So,
say,
yeah, right,
that's
so,
I just
that's
wanna
what
say
I'm
that
saying,
for the
that
whole
we want
audience,
to,
too.
I want to get it
yeah, right.
in tune with where we are today.
So one other piece of that, actually, in looking at our existing 2 decades old master plan, is I see schools literally account for 1 page out of the 173 pages.
Right.
And so we have a new superintendent here. We're looking at our horizon. And while we've been talking a lot about business, obviously part of our community that ties into business, commerce, are our schools. And so I would really advocate for including.
I have had great conversations with Dr. Price. As a matter of fact, today she reminded me, I'm here for you whenever you need me. As she said, she agrees, she understands the importance of the school system in terms of helping us not only draw business in, but residents, and it's very important. Couldn't agree with you more, and that is something we are working with.
Excellent. Thank you.
The 125 corridor, you said that you could implement the changes. I understand there need to be some voting and warrants. Is there any reason why you're not coming to the town meeting this year with warrants for that?
We've just, I'll be honest with you, just started the process in terms of engaging with, we've started it on the overlay itself. We will now engage on a wider basis, as we, I shouldn't say as we speak because it's at night, but staff is preparing the contacts that we need to make for the property owners and potential business owners along the corridor to engage that. So, we're not prepared. I like to do things a little more holistically, so that all the moving parts are working together, and that's.
And what about, we were talking to Andrew about it with the Merrimack Valley Economic Development, all the meetings that have been had, public and not public per se, and all the vacant property. So what's being done on that count? Because this is definitely longer term that
Yeah.
It's probably short term to all of you, but to me it seems longer term and it's very deliberate and I understand that. But in the meantime, what's being done from a planning aspect of attracting businesses into this town, which translates into revenue, which we know we need?
I think you might be referring, was Andrew talking about Merrimack Valley Means Business?
No,
Right.
I asked him because he was in the paper.
Right. Was that what it was about?
But that's
I
what
thought
it's called,
that's what we were-
Merrimack Valley
right,
Means
so-
Yeah,
Business.
I
Right.
think that was the event I
Right, yeah.
referenced. But just in general,
Well, we are talking, and Andrew's great, stepping up our marketing. Yes, we plan on doing those things. And one of those avenues, the Merrimack Valley Means Business, helps the communities in the Merrimack Valley Planning Commissions. What are I forget
The mayors,
Yeah,
mayors and managers,
and mayors and
coalition.
managers, and I forget how many communities, but it's essentially from Lawrence, Andover, Thorn, Havel, all the way, east to Salisbury. And that's a more regional approach as well, but we can, all of us, the towns working individually for themselves, but as well collectively on the region. So we are stepping that up, and that certainly doesn't have to wait for anything.
Yeah.
That's other what I'm than- wondering. right.
What can you do with that?
Right.
Thomas, did you have anything? We dived into the same second.
I'm just I'm still struggling about and maybe that's really not part of our meeting here, but are we really thinking that some consultants will tell us how the town has to look like in a couple of years? We did this 3 years ago and we got that report about 125.
But that was a consultant.
Or something.
Yeah.
Consulting,
Yeah.
And now we're spending another, service of go out and evaluate
But
what
the
we
route,
have.
but the Route 125 report was for a specific area, while the master plan is comprehensive the entire town.
So that 125 did not take into account what the town wanted in terms of a mix of businesses and residential?
Along 125.
I'll be honest with you, I don't know
What I
the
was thinking.
outreach to the public that the consultant, it was UMass, right?
And it was UMass and was also pro bono, wasn't it? It
Right.
was like a class
Correct.
project.
So-
Right,
so
it
in a
was class
sense,
project to graduate students.
and they were
Yeah.
making their
No
own
doubt.
recommendations.
yeah.
But it was for a
Thomas is
specific
saying-
area as
Yeah.
opposed to. It was
Yeah.
just for
But
the
in their research,
125
they did not do
corridor.
data gathering across the whole town then?
Right.
Right.
Right,
Is that
no.
Correct.
So we feel the need? That's-
Yeah. It's really them trying. I imagine that they're like the facilitators for us.
Yes.
Mhm.
They want to help us.
Right.
Right.
Hold
They're
up
not,
the mirror
they're
to
not
us
going
and
to
say-
tell us what the town should do or what the town should be like. Was that your question?
Yeah, no. But it's yes and no. We asked them, have a look and see and make, a couple of ideas and recommendation, what can be done at 125. And we might hire more consultants, and they tell us what to do that open space and that open space. But I think at the end it comes down that probably by the town manager, I have this vision. For the next 10 years, this is what I want. Let's just support the consultants, helping us understanding is that in
No,
that
I
timeline.
think you're confusing as to what the consultant's role is going to be. The consultant's role is going to be to facilitate the process, not to write the report and tell us, this should be zoned X, this should be zoned Y, whatever. The community's going to determine that.
But that's a misunderstanding. So
Yeah, the consultant is facilitating the process. They're the professional who can.
So he
who
calls
can-
the meetings and said, okay, now
He can walk us through the
Tom,
process.
you-
The company will offer suggestions or ways to look at different things or whatever. But the town of North Andover will decide what its master plan looks like.
Okay.
Not someone is going to hand us a book and go, here you go.
And planning will be issuing ultimately the ta-da document.
Yes, yes, planning has the
You
privilege
really
of
like
that.
that, don't you?
And because they will recommend it
Yeah, it's
to
very-
town.
it's a
That's
Right.
what you're just
Yes,
trying to
yes.
understand.
Planning will recommend it to town. But also part of, a town could say, I want, a pie in the sky type thing. I do think the consultants are there to
Right.
ground you and focus you, but the overall tenor, where we want to go as a community, will be defined as by the community, and
So we'll have a series of charrettes.
yes.
Okay, so which is a charrette, you make a big tent someplace, you have
We'll
bunch
use
of
the Stevens
stations
estate.
around
There you
someplace.
go.
You use the Stevens estate. You have,
A lot of meetings.
break it up into groups.
Yes.
You have facilitators in each group. People
Yes.
come up.
And it would be a
this and
perfect
that.
place because of the number of parlors and different rooms you have up there that you can utilize.
Okay, and then you might have, with the town of 30,000,
No, but you're gonna have multiple times during the year, multiple
Yep.
different pods of people.
Different
You'll have
times a day.
businesses,
Yeah.
community, residents,
Right.
rentals,
Schools.
homes,
Yeah.
schools. I mean,
Right.
and then you're gonna bring them together. It's like a moderator, negotiator, facilitator, project manager. That's
Yep.
what you're hiring for
then
89.
then that gets written up and then probably divided up among,
And then worked on in more detail.
and worked out
Sort
in
of
more
like your
detail.
sort of like your finance report, finance
I
committee
was gonna say
report.
it's a great analogy, except we'll do it a little more quickly than 3 years, but yes.
Well, I think
But we have different definitions of
Yeah.
short term.
Is it a-
Yesterday
okay.
was mine, short.
Just to clarify things, we're not going to wait to do something on the 125 corridor until
No,
the.
no, that's what Eric already said.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Right,
Okay.
and I think it's, for me, I'm asking about timing. To me, waiting is, I would like at the town meeting to see the warrants on the implementation of
Oh,
125
absolutely.
recodification, so then we can start actually doing something about it.
Yep,
And now I'm
absolutely.
hearing a year delay.
Yeah.
And I'm just, with all the
Well, I wouldn't
vacancies.
call it a
I'm-
delay.
Well,
Okay.
Just a year
would it
away.
be? Okay, well,
Delay implies that nothing's been done and we're sitting on
You're
it.
right.
So that's-
Another year working on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
well, I didn't get started till, that's part of the process. If you wait 20 years and then you wake up to this in the middle of January, you really don't have a trajectory to get in the next year. So I absolutely hear what you're saying. And Jennifer, and I would, to your point, Thomas, I think the other part of this is I would look to these consultants, yes, as facilitators, but with any good consultant, you really want to also get data from them.
Right.
They're the guys and gals that have seen it in all these communities.
And then
really
most likely they've done it in other places
Right,
too.
you really want to squeeze that from them, because that's a perspective we can't bring ourselves.
Right.
And that's the other critical point. That choice of consultants, is that Andrew's domain? Is that planning? Who is really going to be making
It is an
that?
RFP, RFQ process.
Okay.
Where we put together a scope of services and qualifications, and then evaluative criteria and minimum criteria that must be met. And proposals that are received will be scored by anywhere between 3 and 5 individuals without consulting with each other. And then those scores will be tallied, and most likely we will then interview the top 3 scoring firms and make a decision there, ask them to submit a price proposal, and then execute a contract.
And I would
Well,
just
Well,
we
the
say,
have
criteria.
We have already a $90,000. Was it 90 or 100? No, it was part of your 110, right?
Yes, right.
So I don't know how much it is.
Say around 80, 90.
And do we feel that this is reasonable, or is?
Do you already have
is it
RFPs
not,
out?
Is it
No,
not?
no, we don't
is
have
it
the
not
RFP
enough?
yet.
Because it
So-
seems like
But it's a
fairly big bundle.
it's a multi-year
They
project.
can't
Can't put it out
Approve.
until they get the money.
For the right.
Right.
So the money's in FY17,
The money is to
but
pay some.
the money is for the FY17 budget. So we will most likely
I hear you.
start the process in early
I
May,
gotcha, man.
so that we can hit the ground running in July, August.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, because it's a multi-year, and Jennifer stated this before, we will have monies appropriated in year 2 and year 3 also. So it's not just the $89,000-$90,000 that have been identified in the FY17 budget.
All good stuff.
Right.
It's going to be a fun year.
Right.
there you go.
It is.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Great.
Be making a
Well,
mark.
thank you very
Thank you.
much,
Thank you.
Eric.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Anytime, Rick.
Last man standing.
So I want to, hold on, I want to state that
Outstanding,
just
right.
again clearly, because you were somewhat quiet. You are saying that they cannot put an RFP out until after this 110 is approved.
Right,
Thank you.
right. Well, I'm not sure 100% on that, but
no. What we do is, most likely, as we get
you get close enough.
close enough, it's money is appropriated for a fiscal year, but it doesn't mean you can't start the process earlier. You just cannot award a contract.
Totally fine. So the
Okay.
question is, and I asked, have the RFPs been started? Has the criteria been set? And the answer is no.
No.
We're near the end of March. The town meeting is when?
May 10th.
So it would seem to me, between the time of putting together criteria and RFPs, those would already be out the door already.
No,
So the idea that-
because then you're too early. So let's say we issue something May 1st.
Yeah,
It's 3 weeks to get proposals in,
okay.
and then you have another 5 to 6 weeks to make your decision and issue and be ready on July 1st with a contract execution.
Got it. Thank you.
I mean, we do that in a number of different things.
Okay.
Anything
Great.
for me?
I had one quick
Sure.
question for you, and you may or may not know the answer.
This time I got a pen to write, because I'm not sitting next to Jennifer to steal hers.
The charter, did the charter language
That's a
come back
fight.
from the school department for a special town meeting within the town meeting to access the funds for special?
Yes, we talked about that last week.
Okay, I wasn't.
There's been no set amount yet, but Jim gave you the report
Right,
through
so we have
February.
the report.
We have a sense.
I was more concerned about the mechanics of.
Yeah, so again, as I explained last week, it'll be a special town meeting within the town meeting.
Yeah, I got
so
it
it's
then. I'm up to
so
speed.
we'll probably post it, the special town meeting for 7:15, because you want to not set it at the same time. So
Right.
after that, anytime after 7:15, the town moderator will recess town meeting, call the special town meeting to order, have special town meeting do its business, adjourn special town meeting, and then whatever term is used to restart up regular town meeting.
Okay. All right, great.
That's the process.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Yeah.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. You want to do the minutes and then the discussion last? So,
Yeah,
yeah, March 3rd.
thanks for showing me after.
All right, so why don't we take a look over the minutes for March 3rd, which, let me see. Myself, Karen, Chris, and Jennifer can comment on because we were there.
It's me asking questions. Oh. Angela, when these go in for the record, will there, I know we discussed this about the fact that what's on Google Drive and so forth eventually could go away, but will there be a link to the budget on the final agenda? Or like a link to the Google Drive to the budget book?
I mean, right now, all I know it's in Dropbox.
Oh, that's right, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, whatever's in Dropbox will probably move. I know.
I don't know. But
Right,
I
I think
always
that's-
keep
I'm just,
everything.
yeah, but the
Right.
public couldn't click on the Dropbox link and get it anyway, so therefore.
Well, the budget book is, so I think what's,
We do
really,
have-
when we talk about getting the whole website reorganized, as you should, along the lines
In the
you
future.
suggested, in the future.
Yeah, okay, but not now.
We would do that, but I don't
Not-
think we'd be able to link from the minutes. Like, the budget book is definitely already there. It's on the town website. We could, certainly it wouldn't be,
I'm just saying, if there was
incredibly
somebody
hard.
reading our minutes, right,
right,
could they have a quick link to the budget?
right.
If
Yeah, and
they
I-
could, I would like it included. If not,
Yeah.
no, then no.
See, that would probably, Chris would call up.
Right.
Would be that person.
Yeah.
I would have if I had a working laptop right now, found it for you.
Okay. Is there any motion
I see.
relative to
You
the?
mean you just type in something that turns a different color?
There's a Google
Right.
search on our website now. You can find anything now.
Yeah.
Thanks to Chris. I moved.
I have a clear question. He sent around a memo to everyone asking for questions.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be a good question to put on it. Did you
Oh,
get?
no, I could find it right now. My computer just shut down.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
it's not.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, but I think what you're talking about is admirable, that you want to get to a point where, the meeting minutes would be, and the documents would be,
Any documents we
Linked-
referenced
right,
would be
would be
linked.
linked
A link
in.
in the meeting minutes,
right.
exactly. And I
And now they're a
understand
little
that.
bit more sort of non-dynamic,
Yes.
flat PDF without, you can put links in a PDF, but I don't think we're there yet. What?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we're
Okay.
quite there yet. I think we'll be there, and I think Chris will get us there. I
Yeah.
just don't know that we're there yet. Okay. Any motions relative to the minutes for March 3rd?
A motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And, move to accept the minutes for March 8. Anybody?
Second.
Oops, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
How much are
Lynn did provide us with the, I might have missed it, a lot of emails, budget transfers? I know we saw Jim Neely's February numbers. Okay, we
That's
did see
it.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, that was it, okay,
That's it.
sorry.
So what's the whole? This
Well, you didn't
email was
mention
very
that.
strange. Hmm?
No, go ahead. You.
Jim's. I thought there was that we were on our way to something like 300,000 or 400,000 out of the sped fund.
No, I think it's still 141 to 150.
Is that right?
That's what he's projecting right now.
Well,
Yeah.
then I must have missed.
No, I'm feeling something with you as
Really?
well, that we've already pulled, you guys understand the job, pulled from the contingency?
Well,
And we're
there's-
going to go beyond what the contingency
So
was.
there's the contingency.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's a couple different buckets. So within the operating budget for the schools department, they basically projected what their special ed costs would be based on what they knew and their projections.
Yeah.
And they said, okay, here's our budget. And then they said, we'll set aside 344. That's the
That
that's
top
the number
number
from
there.
May.
Yeah.
We'll set aside that as part of the operating budget.
As a contingency.
It's a contingency.
Backup plan.
Right.
We've already gone through that.
We've gone through that, and now we're going into the
That's where you
the
get your total
reserves.
number. I
The
think.
reserves.
Yeah.
So the total amount we've gone sort of over his projection is $485,000, or
That's
actually
where you get the
$86,000.
I just wanted to tie to that. Thank you.
But we had, but we're going through the contingency first, and then the reserves second.
But from a budgeting standpoint, I understand what
I-
you're saying, which is, here's the number we started
No,
out.
but we want to replenish
Yeah.
the
Thinking.
contingency back again, and in fact, we might want to look at it being more. Isn't that really for next year?
Exactly
It's also about
right.
budgeting.
It's going to be done this year. When does the warrant close?
It's already-
The contingency? Well, the contingency is just part of the next year's budget. So when the schools come, we'll see
they're
what they
gonna
have for
hopefully see it.
contingency.
Yeah.
What they have for contingency in the operating budget for next year. And so I agree, as part of the reserve transfers, we would
Great.
probably want to see a transfer from other funds,
Funds
free cash
back
or something
into
like that, to put
contingency.
it back
Right.
in to the reserve fund.
What plan do we have for that? Is there for that?
We haven't been presented
We
with it
haven't
yet.
seen that yet.
Okay, so it's going to be at least,
So
I have to pull that out again and see if there's some sort of threshold, like you're not going to replace $1 drawn down
Right.
with $1 you're going to wait. So what are we going to do? Maybe certainly the 141 and maybe the 150, but do they make it out of free cash or something, or what?
Yeah, I would
But that's something
imagine.
where we have to have a special meeting, correct?
Well, no, we wouldn't have to have a special meeting.
Sorry, the
It could be
town.
a warrant. No, it wouldn't be so in other words, when we go through and we do our funding from year to year,
Yeah.
there'll be a section on transfers to reserves.
Yes.
And Andrew hasn't presented all of those to us yet.
Not presented yet.
Right.
When is that being presented? Do we know on our calendar?
Well, we'll get the warrant articles. We'll get the warrant articles in March at some point. So
Will
we
we
will
be
get
meeting
all
with
these things.
Andrew after we receive those?
In
Right.
this month,
ask
we're going to
questions.
get those warrant articles?
Yeah, we should get the warrant articles this month.
This month's half done.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Like,
Okay.
gone.
Right.
That's fine.
Okay.
From a budget standpoint,
All right, well then-
and I imagine that
Okay.
it makes sense to. Here's how I kind of look at it, right? Like when you're looking to the transfers to the various different budgets
Yes.
towards the end of the year, you're going to want to do that when you have the most clarity about what's going to be left over from the year before and potentially fall to the unrestricted, what we call free cash,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so you're going to know most about that at the end of the year as you get closest to
And the end of the year
financial
ends
year.
when? Because
The
it's
year
not
ends on
calendar.
June 30,
Oh. So he
right?
wants to get as close as he can to that.
We want to get as close
So
as we
that'll
can
give us
to
very
that so he
little
has more
time.
clarity to do that.
Process that.
But, on the other hand, they're also fairly simple because it's not talking about an investment. It's just allocating, just more or less to a savings account.
Well,
So
sure.
I think as long as we're comfortable, I think we have a good framework. We have a reserve policy. We know right now because we have the reserve policy in place. We know right now what our targets are for all the different funds, and we've established that, and we have a policy on that.
Right.
So I think it becomes very easy when Andrew could give us the numbers 20 minutes before town meeting, and we could evaluate it and say the policy says this, you're giving us that we won't recommend that. So we'll get a chance.
Okay.
What we'll do is
It won't
we'll get it to
happen
Andrew. Right.
This year, what happened last year?
Right.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
We hope.
Yeah. But we'll get it. We'll get it from Andrew.
Okay.
And those are operating transfers, which are entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get the warrant articles, we'll get them. The warrant has to be published. We have to get all those warrant articles. We get the language, well before we write our report and everything. So I look at our key report writing dates as basically
Next
the
week.
next the next 2
Well,
weeks.
that's what I'm
The
saying.
next
So
two
well
weeks.
before means what? Tomorrow? That I'm having trouble.
Right,
with
but what I'm
timing.
saying is like
Yes, the timing is
it's
compressed.
very
Yeah, it's compressed on this, but not
It's
on other
compressed.
things. It seems to be.
Well, yeah, because we have the discipline here comes from town meeting. We get a budget in February, and we have to have our recommendations ready. 2 weeks before, with 6 weeks before town meeting. So yeah, that's why we're compressed and we're running on this one, I would say.
Well, 10 now.
But I do think that I've certainly made it
You did.
clear to Andrew that what I want to see in the reserves is follow the policy.
surprises.
Follow the policy, that we have in place. And so I think anything, frankly, if I see anything that's out of line and not in alignment with that, as a committee, we have at the end of the year when we
where
come
it comes
to
in.
each warrant article, we can accept we can
Right.
accept it as
I
written, or
remember
we can
seeing
recommend
that in
a
the book,
different amount. So, I think that's pretty clear ball and strike. Like
Did
if,
you do that all last year in one meeting, or did you have a series
many.
of many?
right. So we had,
Okay.
last year we got the warrant language sort of late. So we distributed one. We had gone through the entire budget. We agreed with all the operating numbers. Ray came in and we voted on each line of the budget in terms of the allocations of funds. And then the next meeting, we went through and wrote our comments along with our recommendation. We recommend favorable action on this warrant article. And then,
Then we got to work.
right, we got it to work. And so we can have a recommended amount and we could have a recommended action, and then, it could be we could say to town meeting, we think we need to increase the reserves more than is proposed in this plan, and this is how we think we should do
Yep.
that. So that's all within our remit to do. Okay,
And we have the school budget next week,
right,
so I'm sure she's gonna talk about this also.
Right.
About that, is the
And I'll-
Oh, yeah.
141,000 now,
Right.
the final number, is it going up? I'm sure she's gonna address that.
right. And I'll send out again and copy her the budget presentation that she made to the school committee, I think, so we all sort of can preview that and say if there's any additional information that, ask her if there's any additional information that she thinks we should have before the meeting, next week, to send along, and we can.
I would like
do
at
that.
some point to be able to have the leisure to discuss this, our chairman's lunchtime work. Is,
What is that?
oh, did you,
Oh, it's in the reading materials.
Sorry.
yeah, it was
I also sent out the Excel sheet.
the Excel sheet.
So-
What our chairman did was he went into the Department of Revenue special site where you can pull together all sorts of statistics,
Oh, yeah, I saw this.
and then he did. I doubt that this part of the meeting is the time we'd like to take on this, but I think I'd like to have it on at some point.
Sure.
To look at and study, because I think it's,
Is this something they'll be doing every year going forward?
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I think that the data, lags, so
yeah.
it takes a few years for the
That's
state to get all
perfectly
the
fine,
thing.
But it'd be
I
nice to
think,
have year to year.
yeah, but I
look
think
at all of this. We've been wanting this kind of information for a very long time.
Well, it let us at least say to the citizenry, here's relatively where we stand
Yes.
across a lot of measures, and you can kind of, waffle some of this, but over time, you get a sense of trends. It also, I think, starts delivering a message of opportunity, gaps, or whatever. It can engage a discussion. It's a good way to crystallize, or at least initiate that. So, Bill, I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, the Excel was mind-blowing filtering that.
And simple.
Could you imagine? I had to stop.
But
Can we
simple,
reference
Bob.
this? Is this something?
well, it's in with the material, so it's part of the public record.
So it doesn't have a name?
It's the North Andover Financial Comparison.
I see, okay, it's just on the second page. on
If
this
you
one.
can't find them online, will you let me know?
I bet
Would you
Jennifer
mind?
Price would be impressed with this.
If you can't
I
find
sent it
these
to her.
online.
You did?
Yeah.
Would you let me
Ah,
know and I
very
will
good.
find them and
Very
get you the
good.
links?
Also known as the Billy sheet.
Very good.
So,
That's
no, I mean, I think it was a very interesting exercise, and I think,
That's at
really,
least 3
our
hours of
rank
work.
doesn't really tell us a lot, but I think the, percentage,
Oh, I
the
think the real
deviation from
numbers,
mean helps,
It's food thought. You can. I mean, you got to be careful.
Right.
You can't just take it at the face value and say, hey,
Right.
why is Andover, spending 3 times more on arts and crafts compared to, what's it called, culture and recreation? They spend
Yeah.
4 times more than we do.
Right.
What does that mean?
Yeah, well, right, but it's some nice statistics in
Yeah.
here for
absolute.
argument.
It's a starting point. Why? And
It starts a conversation, and that's right.
Yeah, that's what you wanna
So it's
do.
called the North Andover Financial Comparison.
Mhm.
So if I Google this.
Yeah, it's on the second page, right?
Oh, no,
No.
I made this.
He
so,
made
I mean,
it.
this exists.
Wait a minute. You made this?
He
I
made
thought
it.
you
What
said
I did-
chairman. I
You
thought you were
pulled-
joking about something
No,
else.
you
No.
pull the data.
He did
No,
this
so
at
I-
lunch.
I pulled the data. I pulled the data by
I
town.
thought you were joking.
No, I pulled the data by town, which is on the Mass DOR site. And the
Yes.
value add that I did was that the only thing that I did that wasn't on the Mass site was I took in every category,
Yeah.
right? DOR income per capita, I just copied from their thing, but all those individual things except schools where I used the Department of Education figures.
Yes.
Because those are the commonly accepted ones.
Yeah.
You did.
All those other figures, I divided them per capita. So basically, if you looked at the list, obviously like a Lowell or a Lawrence, they're going to have, much bigger numbers. So I
Yes.
divided everything per capita. So that was my value add. And then at the bottom, when I did the rank, I just used the Excel rank function to come up with where does North Andover rank of these 18 communities. And then from there,
Okay.
I did what's our deviation from the mean.
And you
Would
think
you-
this should be between us at this time, this document?
I mean,
It's public information.
it's part of the public record right now.
Everybody
Okay,
can
well,
get
do
it.
Just
do
in a
you think
meeting
it might be
and talk
nice
about
if you annotated what you did to these lines, so, next year you could remember what
Yeah.
you did to
Oh,
them?
yeah, sure.
And we might, yeah, okay,
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get
okay,
In your free time.
we done?
Yeah.
Get the minions right on that, right?
Okay.
Just lunch, at 20,000 feet in the
No,
air,
no,
right?
Really.
There's a
Yeah.
webpage where you can
Yeah,
download
nice.
that.
Well,
that
it's,
information. So I think you only could get that type of information if you want to have spending by school or by students. Or is it also there? Or
Well,
you
the-
just stopped.
No, so the schools numbers, I brought in the schools numbers. The Department of Education has a very good site, and you can get the same information on that site. I used that when it came to the per pupil
Yeah.
because different towns report them differently, and you don't want the spending per capita on schools.
No,
You
you
want
want
the
it
spending per
per
student.
student.
Right.
So I'm saying it's a compilation of two different
Yeah.
reports.
So I did use some different sources. I can put some
Okay.
footnotes on it and dress it up a little bit.
I don't need to have you do more work. I just thought it's
No,
pretty,
no,
I
it's pretty
like footnotes.
spectacular and it should be public.
Yeah. There it is. Great. Well,
All right. Do we have any motions?
like, let's adjourn.
Duct tape Jen. I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. We just barely made the form.